Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 7 of the ES335 build. Now I said at the beginning of this build that it was going to be quite complicated and that it would require the manufacture of a lot of jigs and tooling, etc. And I'm going to cover the building of one of the most important parts of that tooling in this episode. Okay, so we've got our top and we've got our back all nicely carved and ready to go. But obviously that's too thin for a guitar, so we need something to spread these out a little bit, and that's going to mean a pair of ribs formed to the shape of this. And what I'm going to make that out of are these pieces of constructional veneer. So this is 1.5mm thick maple veneer. Now this is quite flexible, but I don't think it's flexible enough to go around that shape. So we're going to have to find a way of forming that, and we're going to need a form to form it over. So that's going to be my next task, is to make the bending form. And essentially what I need is something the same shape as half of one of these, with an additional bit of square material on the bottom so that I can hold it in my vise, etc. I've done a bit of calculation, and the body needs to be about 45mm thick. So my top and bottom are 6mm each at the edge, so that's going to give me 12mm. So I'm then going to need my ribs at about 33mm. I'm actually going to make them at 35. I'm going to make them a little bit oversized, and then we can trim them once they're all glued up, etc. So I need to make something that's half of that shape, about 35-36mm thick. That works out quite well because I've got some 18mm MDF, so if I put two pieces of that together, that will make my former. Now this is all way too big for my little bandsaw at the moment, so I'm going to just very roughly cut this out with a jigsaw, and then we can tidy it all up with the bandsaw and the sanders. Okay, so there's my two halves kind of roughly cut. And I'm going to take them to the bandsaw. I'm going to cut one as close to the line as I can get it. And then I'll clean that one up on the spindle sander and the disc sander to get it to the exact shape that I need. And then once I've done that, the other one I will cut on the bandsaw a little bit away from the line. And then I'll join these two together and use the one that I've shaped properly as a template, so I can template route the other one so they're both exactly the same shape. Right, to the bandsaw. Okay, so that's the first half kind of sanded into shape, and I've drilled all the holes that I'm going to use to screw it to the other half. But before I go any further with this, there's a really important thing that I have to do, because this is the size of the outside of the guitar. And of course the ribs I'm going to be making are 3mm thick. So if I made them to this shape, they'd be too big. So what I'm going to have to do is scribe around the outside of this 3mm and then trim again back to that line. Then I can mount it to the other half and we can route that to shape. Okay, back to the bandsaw and the sanders just to repeat that process. Okay, so that's the bulk of the shaping done on this, but we're not quite finished yet. We're obviously going to have to clamp the laminates for the ribs to this form quite securely to get the bends that we need. So on some of the areas, like for instance in this cutout here, I can use a clamp pretty much from one end to the other and probably get away with that. But I haven't got an unlimited supply of big clamps, so I'm going to have to use some smaller ones somewhere. And to facilitate that, I'm going to drill a series of holes around this section of the mould so that I can use these smaller F clamps to hold this down. In this area, and especially in this cutout here, and maybe around the end of the horn, I'm going to create some shaped cauls so I can get some good positive clamping onto there. So that will need cutouts as well to position the clamps to hold those in place. So the first thing I need to do is measure this clamp so I can drill the appropriate size holes into this form. Okay, so that's those holes drilled in. I also took the opportunity to just kind of relieve the back edge of this a little bit. So I've chamfered that back. And the reason I've done that is so that I can get a clamp on here and pull the laminates past the kind of center point so that that curve will continue round instead of going straight down. There was the possibility that if I clamped and glued these with it going straight down, it could spring back a little bit and I wouldn't get the shape that I wanted. So hopefully that will compensate for that. Okay, so with that done, the final last little step of this now is to create the cauls that are going to go into these areas, just to make sure I'm getting the right shape when I glue up. And to do that, I've just got some kind of scraps of wood. The beauty of guitar making is that you always end up with these odd shaped little bits, but hopefully these will come in handy and do what I need them to do. Right, get down on the bench and get marking them out. Okay, so I've just cut those out and given them a quick sand up off camera just to get this moving along a little bit, and they're all fitting really nicely and they all clamp in position quite well. At this stage, how that works when we've actually got the laminates around the outside of this form, I don't know. Now, I don't really know how good these have to be in terms of if they're a bit rough, will they leave impressions in the rib when I glue it together? I've never done this before, so I don't know. So I'm going to take a little bit more time just to sand these up and get them a bit smoother, just in case. But I'm going to do that off camera and leave this episode here. I'll be back very shortly where I'll be making the outer mould for the body. But until then, I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.